Welcome back to the Real Estate Girls podcast. We're your hosts, Heather.
And Casey.
Whether you're buying, selling, or just obsessed with the market, we're here to bring you expert advice, behind the scenes stories, and a dose of realness.
We got a fantastic episode lined up for you today. We're thrilled to welcome a special guest, someone who's not only a seasoned lawyer, but also one of the top title agents in our area. So, Sarah Hess is someone we both know professionally and personally. She is an accomplished attorney at Hess Law Offices located right here on Panama City Beach. Before stepping into her current role, Sarah dedicated over a decade as the Assistant Regional Counsel for the Office of Criminal Conflict and Civil Regional Counsel in Jacksonville, Florida. She also served as a senior attorney for the Florida Department of Children and Families from 2009 to 2012. Sarah is a proud local. She began her education at Gulf Coast State College, earning her Associates of Arts degree before going on to Florida State University, go Noles, where she received her Bachelor of Science in Political Science and Government. She then earned her Juris Doctor from Samford University's Cumberland School of Law in 2006. Beyond her impressive career, Sarah has a heart for service. She's passionate about dog rescues as she is the director at Quincy's Hope Dog Rescue and a former member and dedicated volunteer at the Junior League of Panama City. She also serves as a pro bono attorney for children in the foster care system. Through her work and community involvement, she's truly making a difference here in Bay County. Heather and I have personally relied on Sarah's expertise and professionalism over the years, and we are so excited to have her on the show today. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Sarah.
Making me blush.
I know this is not your thing, so thank you so much for coming on and putting
Definitely
yourself
not.
out there. I want to know a little bit about the dog rescue. I know you're the director at Quincy Hope, and you've been doing this for a long time. So first off, how did you get into it? How long have you been doing it? And how many dogs have you rescued?
Quincy's Hope is a local nonprofit rescue. We're foster based, so we don't have a facility. So all of our dogs are placed in homes, which is great. It helps them learn manners and get them ready for adoption and also decompress from shelter stress. We have 4 directors, and I'm one of the 4. And I really wasn't involved in dog rescue until I moved back to Bay County after 2020. But we have such an overpopulation crisis here. Lots of dogs are being euthanized. And I got involved because I saw on Facebook, on social media, a plea for some dogs that were going to be euthanized in Chipley. And this one dog just caught my attention. And I was sitting at my desk in my office crying over this dog. He just grabbed me. And I said, I will sponsor him. I will pay whatever is needed. I just, can't stand this. And I was basically told that, hey, money is great, but we don't have anywhere to put this dog. We need a foster. And so Murphy came to my house, and that's how it got started. And, with the economy and everything, the animal crisis has just gotten worse. And it's all over online. Everybody pleading for these dogs and cats that need help. And so once I started fostering, I was also volunteering, and we just kind of get looped in. So.
Absolutely. So you're not only, you're fostering, you're bringing them into your house, and then you're trying to place them with a family. Is that correct?
Yep. So we fully vet all the families. We do vet checks, home checks, and ultimately the goal is to get them all in a great home, a forever home. And I've had about 15 dogs come through my house, I think, in the last 3 to 4 years, and our rescue has helped probably between 150 and 200 dogs in that time. So
That's amazing work.
That is so amazing.
And are these dogs, are they just like families that just say, hey, we just can't afford to keep them, or, it's not working out with our family? What are the cases?
a lot of that is, especially with the economy, people having to give up their pets for, either financial reasons, or if they lose their housing and have to go in with other people. But a lot of it is just the overpopulation of pets here. Bob Barker always said it, like spay and neuter. And so that really is part of the big issue, is some of them have never actually had a home. They're like litters of puppies that are born, or strays. So It just depends. Every dog, we don't always know their backstory, so we don't know what we're getting. If it's a dog that's been in a home before and has some manners, or if they've never had a loving home. So it can be all different circumstances.
Well, thank you for that work because
Yeah.
that is, you don't know what you're getting, and you're actually making a huge impact on the lives of these dogs. So we appreciate that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And aside from pet rescue, you own your very own vacation rental Airbnb here in Panama City Beach.
I do, and it's funny to say I actually love hosting Airbnb. My rental is actually on my property that I live on, so it's a little different because I do interact with the guest more than maybe some people that don't live on site where their guests are. But it's been really fun, and it definitely helps me offset my expenses of my home. So that's been an amazing part of it as well. And I do self-manage because since I am interacting with them on the property, I feel like it'd be weird if they were, dealing with a management company and not me and then seeing me. But it's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you custom built this home.
Yes, I did, and I
awesome.
specifically knew that I was going to have a rental unit. But in the future, it could turn into if my, parents needed a place that I could look after them. That would be an option as well. And I think, in the future, we are going to see more multi-generational family living because we are living longer, but also because housing can be so expensive. I know I have friends whose kids are staying home longer while maybe they go to some of our great local colleges or trade schools, and so I think that's a trend that we're going to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
The
I agree.
average, I guess, first time home buyer right now is 38, which is such a shocking number.
Yeah.
But I think it's very forward thinking what you were doing because you're minimizing the cost, right? It's no HOA where you're at, right?
Right.
And then you're managing it yourself. So you're not paying a short-term property manager, which they'll charge anywhere from 15 to 30% of your gross rentals. I mean, you're doing this on your own.
Yeah, and they can be a good value, especially if you're not local. I mean, one of the big things is having a great cleaner, and I do have a great cleaner because that really impacts, your guest experience and your guest reviews. But if you're not local or, you just don't have the bandwidth to manage it yourself, you can get some good value out of property managers and companies like that. But, the margins already are things you have to look at because the cost of insurance in Florida has gotten so high and property taxes as well. So, when you are doing an investment property, you got to look at all the numbers and make sure it will work for you. And so by having it as part of my property and being able to self-manage, that's really helped me be more profitable.
That's awesome. What's the biggest piece of advice you give someone looking to invest in a short-term rental?
Get a realtor that knows about investment property and those numbers. Get your own rental projections. Don't rely on what the seller has provided to you. Look at what your taxes are going to be after you close at the price you're buying at, not what their taxes have been. Make sure that you're properly insured. Because if they're not running it as investment property and they don't have rental coverage, your insurance may be a little higher than what they're paying. And then the other thing is, if you are going to operate it and you want to operate it as an LLC, buy it with your LLC. You can set up the LLC. It's a fairly quick process. And buy it in that. I get a lot of calls where people have closed in their personal names and they say, hey, now I've set up an LLC and I want you to help me do a deed to transfer this property. And it's not always that simple. If you have a mortgage, then most mortgages have a due on sale clause or due on transfer clause that would technically apply if you're transferring it to an LLC. The other thing is the documentary stamp tax. If you are transferring a property, there's a tax on the consideration or the purchase price. And if you're transferring it into your LLC, you may not be trading money with your LLC for that. But if there's a mortgage and that property is encumbered, then there is a tax due on the transfer, and it can be expensive. And, I'm not sure that I think mortgage companies are out checking the property records to see if you have transferred your property. But the way that they might find out is your insurance is now going to say the name of your LLC as your insured. And your property tax bill is going to reflect the LLC that you deeded it into. That naturally happens when you deed a property and it's recorded in the official records. Both the property appraiser and the tax collector are going to pick up that change of ownership. So if you have an escrow and your lender is getting your tax bill and your insurance bill and seeing that it's no longer in your name but now in an LLC, they're going to see that change of ownership.
That's an excellent piece of advice.
That
So
is excellent advice.
Definitely get it done before closing if you're buying an investment.
Yes, and you can set up your LLC in another state or in Florida. If you are going to have a loan in Florida and borrow in your LLC's name, if you set it up in another state, they may want you to register it with Florida to do business. Your interest rate or the structure of your loan may be a little different with an LLC instead of borrowing in your personal name. But if you're looking to the LLC for asset protection, it might be worth it. If you've purchased in your individual name, look at your insurance coverage, maybe an umbrella policy, or making sure you're just properly covered under your homeowners insurance, because that's what most people who are looking to transfer it into an LLC are doing, is they're wanting to get some asset protection.
So, I'm just curious because we've had guests on that they indicated they saw a declining market on Panama City Beach. So, how are your rentals doing this year as compared to last year? I'm just curious on that because are we seeing a declining market? Basically what this appraiser was saying is, the short-term rentals aren't making the numbers that they used to make. And so prices are coming down on the value of properties on Panama City Beach.
So I had a friend that, had some short-term rentals. He's the one that kind of got me into, hey, this might be something I'd be interested in. And he had really great numbers through COVID and in the early 2000s, and I wasn't a host at that time. And he got a great value when he sold some of his properties based on those numbers, which were true numbers. I think during COVID, when people could not maybe fly as much, they weren't going out of the country, they weren't cruising, more people were coming to the beach, and those numbers did get more inflated. And so it has come down some since that time. I've been hosting for 2 years. And I really don't use my first year because I didn't come on till June as a good number. And I was also running deals, trying to get my first reviews, just trying to keep the property booked. Last year to this year, in the first 5 months, so through the end of May, I'm down about $1,500.
Oh, that's not bad.
Which isn't much. And when I looked at everything, what I really equated it to, I do not do a monthly rental in the winter. I keep mine on nightly rental. I'm not on the beach, and there's just some things about mine that, don't appeal as much to snowbirds, and they really are looking for a great deal. So with nightly rentals, I've been able to do some good business that kind of equate me, but I also get to have my property vacant part of the time if I need to do any maintenance or if I just want to relax and enjoy my property without having guests there, because there is a drawback to having guests on your property at all times.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a sacrifice. So what I equated when I looked at breakdown month by month, the year before I had a 2 to 3 week rental in January that this year I did not have. And so that was really kind of the difference in my numbers. What I am seeing is more cancellations, people that book and then maybe they have emergencies, and because of the economy, that wipes out their ability to do a vacation. More last minute booking. I guess people maybe are waiting to see, hey, is that money there? Hey, can we get away from work? And so when that happens, I'm running, lower rates. One of the things that I do because I self-manage is I'm constantly looking at my calendar. And if I get a couple weeks out where I don't have a booking and I have a vacancy, I'm lowering that number, because for me, if I'm making some money is better than making no money. So I manipulate my rates a lot just to try and stay
Absolutely.
occupied. And I love Panama City Beach. I love sharing with people. And hey, if I can give a good deal to a family that, that is a good thing for them, then I feel good about that too.
Absolutely. And I know you said you're not on the beach. You're on Panama City Beach. You're just not like walking out your door and having white sand, but you're very close.
Yeah, I'm in South Lagoon, so it's
Right.
about 4 blocks. Most of my
Right.
guests do walk to
Yeah.
the beach, and so that
Absolutely.
helps. And there are a lot of rentals in South Lagoon because we don't have, an HOA or any restrictions on renting like there are in some other neighborhoods. And with that comes some things that full-time residents don't love about South Lagoon. With me being on site, I don't have as many problems because people who are coming to party maybe aren't renting with a host on site. So I think that helps me out a lot.
Absolutely.
And
I don't
my
want to get
biggest
too wild.
my biggest thing is, I want my neighbors to be happy. I don't want them to feel, like they can enjoy their property because of things that are happening at my property. So
You were very busy. You were sending emails at 10 o'clock last night because you're handling a closing for me today. So
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy like to think how much you do. I think you're just a workhorse, to be honest. And I remember when you moved back in 2020, because I know Sarah personally, we grew up together, but we were on the boat headed to the island or something, and it came up that you were a title agent. And at this time, I had been in real estate for probably a year. And I was like, wait, what? Because I just knew you as like a lawyer, Sarah
Yeah.
Hess. And then when that, when that was told to me, I was like, this is amazing because I wasn't very happy with the title agent that I had been using. There was a lot of things that slipped through the cracks, and I had some issues with it, especially starting out. You don't really know who to go with, so it was great that I knew that you were doing that. And also I just knew that you were a workhorse, and I knew you just with the lawyer background. But my question for you is, how did you get into being a title agent?
Yeah, so in law school, there's all different things that you learn about. And I think some people go in, they really know what they want to do, and that is what they do. And other people go in and they maybe don't end up where they thought they would with their legal career. I always thought I'd be a prosecutor. And when I got out of law school, I ended up working more on the defense side for the state. And I was going to court, 5 days a week, kind of like a public defender. And I loved it. I loved being at the courthouse. I loved court work. I loved litigating. I was in a big office, and I liked the social aspects of that. But I kind of landed in title work by chance. My dad had a law practice that he started when I was 2. And when he went to be a judge, my uncle took it over, and him and his partner, through the course of the years, had started doing insured closings, title work. And with that, it wasn't something I was really exposed to. But when my uncle's partner was retiring, there was an opportunity for me to come and do that. And Brian doesn't do any of the, title insurance closings. So that was kind of where I started my focus, is taking over that load. And I actually love it. I love the transactional work. It is definitely different than what I did before. It's stressful in its own way, as everyone knows. In a real estate transaction, it can get stressful, but it's really been good. I've been in the market when people are happy. There was a time when buyers were really excited to be closing because they may have put in 10 offers and not been able to get a house, and they finally did. And the market's been good, so the sellers have been leaving with good money from the closing table, and they've been very happy too. So it's been a great time to be in real estate.
I mean, and it's just you. I mean, I know you have someone that helps you, but I mean, for you to be one of the top, and you are one of the top in our area, speaks volumes. Because
Yeah.
a lot of these title companies, they'll have 5, 10, closers, and it's just you.
Yeah, so we are a small office, and I've never worked at another title company. I don't know how they do things. I do work with the other title agents because maybe I'm doing a probate that they're doing the closing on, or our office does do 1031 exchanges. So, they may be handling the closing, and we're the intermediary with our office. And I've, had great experiences in dealing with other title agents because I've never worked somewhere else, though I don't know how things operate at other companies. But because it's just me, I have to do everything on the file. I'm responsible for everything from ordering the title search, ordering the lien search, communicating with the buyers and getting their EMD in, generating the title commitment and drafting all the closing documents and, communicating everything with the lender, handling the signing, and even post closing, I do all the bank reconciliations and write the policies. And I know that's a different structure from other title companies. They have, people that handle post closing and people that handle, other aspects. And I mean, that's a dream. That would be great. But right now, it's been great for me to start in this way because I've learned how to do everything on the file.
Absolutely.
I actually appreciate you being so hands-on with the title process whenever I send a contract over to you, simply because you've probably experienced this when there's too many, like the left hand and the right hand, they can't communicate and something gets dropped, and it's nice to have you there to be able to answer questions, handle everything.
Not refer you to somebody else that's handling that part of the
Exactly.
transaction.
And you know exactly everything that's been done, and I appreciate that.
It is a good thing. It can be a bad thing if I'm tied up in something, it is. My practice is more focused now on things that I can do in the office, because with doing closings, it's not conducive to being at the courthouse. I may have a lender that pops up last minute for our closing the next day, needing me to be at my desk and going back and forth on balancing the CD and, providing them any last minute underwriting requirements. But it is a good thing. I like to think it's a good thing that, I'm the only one that, I'm going to have the answers to the questions. I know that, one of the funny things is when I'm dealing with buyers, they think that there's one person at the lender or maybe a couple that are the people and that I'm dealing with. And they are, but as the file progresses, there's so many different people from a lender involved. You'll have a processor, you'll have a closer, you'll have a funder, you'll have an originator. And so, I know how it is to deal with like a team, and it is good because if somebody's out, somebody else jumps in and, but it's nice sometimes just having that one point of contact. I like to think.
I had a closer on the one, hopefully we're closing today, Sarah, but it depends on the lender. But the closers call me up. I had no idea you were the listing agent on this. I'm like, well, I've been on about 100 emails. So if you didn't know now, the day of closing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, different people pop up at different points in the file.
She's like, I'm just a closer. Don't shoot the messenger is what she's saying. And I'm just like, okay, what do you need? Like, let's get it, because I know you're squared away. Like, you're ready to go. But most of the time, you're just waiting on that lender.
Yeah. And I do think that, like, sometimes parties are looking to me about, like, are we on track for closing? And if there is a lender, so much of that is, a lender question. And it's not just the lender, right? They have appraisals and there's different things that are part of their process as well. They may be needing information from the buyer on their income or, other requirements that they have. But when you're looking at, hey, we're going to go under contract, how long do we need to close? The title process is much quicker than the lender process typically. So, and that's why on your cash transactions, they can be closed so much faster.
Yeah. So Sarah, can you break down what a title agent actually does? So the process, and how is it different, but also how is it connected to your role as an attorney?
So, some states are attorney states, and that means only attorneys can do real estate closings. But in Florida, we have title agencies. A lot of them do have lawyers, that are working, but you may be working with an agent that is not a lawyer. They are a licensed title agent. So they have training to do the closing and they hold a license to do that, but they're not an attorney. And so, my legal practice, revolves around, things that go with title a lot. We do a lot of probates, and we do quiet title lawsuits and things that clear up title issues. We can also do deeds and legal documents that a title agent can't do if it's not an insured document because it is drafting a legal document. We also do foreclosures. We help people establish, LLCs and business entities to hold their properties. And a lot of those things are things, again, I can do in the office that don't take me out to the courthouse So if I'm needed on a, last minute closing item or something urgent, I'm there. So that's kind of developed, and it just all naturally goes together. Um, in the past, I think law wasn't as specialized, but now I think people realize that a lot of law firms, they have an area that they practice in that, they do a lot of work in that one area. A lot of criminal attorneys, they mostly do criminal work. And, attorneys that do personal injury, they're mostly doing personal injury. We had somebody that called and they had been bitten by a dog and they wanted Brian to represent them in this dog bite case. And we were trying to say, like, hey, call the Florida bar, get a referral to an attorney that, handles this type of law. And they were like, but Brian's my attorney. And it was, well, he did your will, but you really might want to talk to someone that handles a case that's more specific to that. They're going to be more efficient in that. They're going to, be all up on that, any new case law, any new changes in the rules of procedure or laws, and they will maybe be in front of the judges that typically handle, certain types of cases. So it can be a big benefit to go to, an attorney that does that kind of practice. Some of the stuff I do as a title agent, it's not necessarily a legal thing because as we talked about, other title agents are doing it that aren't lawyers. But, as a title agent, when we get in that contract, we're going to open the file, reach out and coordinate the EMD, start to work with the underwriters for the title insurer to get the title search done, which is generated into that commitment, which goes to the lender or anyone we're issuing a policy to, and then also to the realtors to let them know, hey, we've searched this property, this is the status of the title, because that's what the title commitment does. It says, hey, this is the status of the title, and if we can meet these requirements, we're going to issue a title insurance policy to you.
I know you do a lot, and you also do evictions. You've done one for me and Thomas, and we tried to go through a property manager, and nothing was happening. We get Sarah Hess on it; they're out in like a week. It was incredible.
Wow.
Here's a question for you, Sarah. How do title agents specifically help against fraud? Like, we're seeing this a lot, especially in this area. People trying to sell properties, land, or property that they don't actually own.
Yeah, so there are underwriting requirements that we have for trying to combat property fraud. This is something that I do think has become a bigger issue since I've been a title agent, but also I had no clue about it before I was doing title work. If it was going on, I did not know. Mostly it's with vacant land because obviously if it's a property with a structure, you would need to provide access. If it's an occupied property, that wouldn't work. So a lot in vacant land, and we've had several contracts be submitted to the office that turned out to not be the seller was not the person that actually owned the property. It was someone posing to be the seller. Some of our underwriting guidelines are to talk to the realtors, to talk to any professionals involved in the transaction and see if they have a personal relationship with this seller, whether it be they know them personally or maybe they help them buy the house so they know, or the land, so they know it's the same person. We also send a letter to the address on record with the property appraiser to say, hey, we've received a contract to close your property, and we want to make sure that this is really you. It's a great practice. Not everyone is checking those addresses necessarily. I sent one. It was a very quick turnaround closing, and I sent it priority mail in a big mailer. Typically, I send it in our really nice envelopes on our really nice letterhead that make it stand out.
So they don't throw it in the trash.
Exactly. I'm trying to make it stand out above just a,
Hey, John
junk
Smith,
mail.
are you trying to sell their house?
Exactly.
And John Smith is like, no, I'm not trying to sell my land or house. What is this?
Yes.
Let me get Sarah Hess
So
on
I
the phone.
try and really use the nice letterhead that's like a higher quality paper. This particular one was a really fast closing, so I had done it in express mail. And it turned out that it actually was a fraudulent seller. And when I was able to make contact with a real seller, a real owner of the property who was not selling, he said, I am in my RV, I travel around, and I have informed delivery with the mail service. I saw that mailer, but I didn't know anything about it, know what it was. So it had worked. It had gone to his real address, but he was traveling around the country in RV and did not see it. So that is one thing. On a really quick turnaround, something that I do or have done is
That could be a red flag.
it can be, and a lot of times on a cash, like on a lot deal, it may be a lower value or it may be a cash transaction, so they may be a quicker, closing. So if I don't have a lot of time, one thing I've done is I've contacted a homeowners association or condo association, usually homeowners since it's not an occupied property, and said, and this specific one was at River Camps, and said, hey, I know you can't disclose any information to me, but I've been asked to close this property, and this is the contact information I have for the seller. Can you just verify, is this what you have on file? And they're much more likely to do that than to give you out an owner's information. Also, I've contacted other title agents. We have good working relationships, and said, hey, they just bought this property not that long ago. Can you check and see was this the email you were using for them or whatever? With that, it doesn't mean for sure if it's not the contact information the prior title company had, because people do change emails or phone numbers, not as much now as maybe we used to do when you weren't always porting your number and you were changing cell phone carriers. But those have been good ways to verify ownership.
What about Mexico Beach, Sarah? So just to preface this, a couple years ago, and what I will say, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So if you see a land that is just such a good deal, that could be a red flag too. And so I had an experience a couple years ago. I was a buyer's agent representing the buyer. I found a piece of property for them on Mexico Beach. It was listed with a listing service, which, okay, they didn't go through a realtor. Okay, so that listing service did not go through the process to verify that seller. Okay, we go under contract, but I just, basically I was dealing with the seller, and I just had, where you get like the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You're like, something's not right. Like, let me, we did go under contract, but then within, I would say, an hour, I started investigating this, and I realized the number that they had given me for their contact was like a burner phone, because we have the Forewarn app where we can look up, customers and see if they are who they say they are. So that was like the first red flag. And then I went on the property appraiser's site. I got an address and a name of the actual owner, and I actually found the owner's number through our Forewarn app, called up the owner. She wasn't selling, like, what's going on? And so it opened up this big ordeal. I got you involved, obviously, because you were handling the closing. And it was scary, because if that would have gotten to the closing table, I don't know what the number was, $75,000 lot or $100,000 lot, my buyer could have been out $75,000, $100,000. I mean, I know you have insurance, and we'll speak on that more, but it's very scary.
It is scary, and we do have our processes, but by the time that it gets to me, the realtors have already invested time, which is money. They've already, maybe if it's listed with a listing agent, they've taken pictures. By the time it gets to me, the realtors are victims in the whole thing as well. They're usually out.
They're actually producing actual, driver's license. Like, if you ask for identification, they look legit, without actually physically, it's a picture, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, I mean, we found out right away, but we actually coordinated with the sheriff's office and kept this thing going.
Yeah.
Remember that? How
yeah,
fun that
we
was?
did. We did. And, the interesting thing about that was, one, you have been provided a survey, which I think gives an air of legitimacy to a seller. One of the things about that transaction, which has been a red flag, and I've seen it in many of the other transactions, is the way they explain not being at home to receive that letter is, oh, I'm traveling for work. I'm gone for a couple months.
I'm at a conference.
Yes. And so they just go ahead and tell you that they're not going to be near the area where they should be. The other thing is,
they're not going to be on the address that states this is the owner, where the owner lives, because they aren't the owner.
Right. They like to text. So I've had fraudulent contracts come in where the realtor says, oh, and and texting is the best method. That alone isn't, you know, a necessary red flag that it's definitely going to be fraud, because a lot of us text. But, you know, the strong preference for nonverbal communication, you know, sometimes hopping on a video conference, but even that has gotten very sophisticated with, you know, fake things. That's a good one. We also send notaries that are licensed and bonded and insured through, you know, a specific notary group to go meet with sellers. And that's another way. But yes, the, you know, fake IDs have gotten also very
It's sophisticated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we get alerts now. You remember in
Yeah,
our
through the
emails, we
sheriff's
get
department.
alerts through the sheriff's department, and they'll say, hey, you know, this is another fraudulent scheme that happened last. I mean, I feel like we get them all the time now.
Yeah, we do get them all the time. I actually had to get with you to get a phone number because I was
the
worried about
investigator.
one. It turned out to actually be the seller,
Okay.
but they were showing all the red flag signs, and I thought, this is just not setting right. It did turn out to actually be the seller, though.
Well, and one of mine that I could not believe that it ended up coming out being a fraudulent transaction. And I had started with all of our underwriting guidelines, you know, talking to the realtor about a personal relationship. Hey, how did they find you if you don't know them? Another one, you know, that was one thing. And she said, well, you know, their email is, just say John Smith was the owner.
It's always
well,
the
their
name.
email is John
John
Smith
Smith,
at Gmail, you know, or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but, and it did end up being a fraudulent contract. But if you think about things like sending out a letter and waiting, during that whole time, I'm working the file. I am doing, you know, ordering everything, preparing things, and investing in that file, just like the realtor had. And she was very upset. She had money and time invested.
Absolutely.
But he was definitely wanted me to email him the documents. He would take them to his own notary. He did not want to meet with my notary. He was out of town. But what gave an air of legitimacy to me from the transaction from the jump was that there was a big fight over some of the closing cost, and they were having me do some preliminary closing cost estimates on the prices during negotiation. And because the seller side was so set on this number, I thought that it gave an air of legitimacy that this was a real seller. And I still don't know if
said,
it
"I
was
want
the
that money really
buyer
fast."
or the seller's realtor just really doing a great job negotiating and advocating, or if it was the seller, because to me, you know, that too good to be true deal, you know, any amount of money when you have no cost and no skin in the game is, you know, a good amount. And there have been, not at our office, but there have been closings. You know, I do a lot of continuing education with my title company. I get the bulletins from the sheriff's office, as well as our underwriters send out bulletins. And there have been deals that have gone through, and you
sad.
do have your policy, but because a lot of times there are vacant land, you know, once that land starts to be improved, then you've got more in it than the land purchase if you're a buyer. One of the things that's also now available, and people see commercials for title lock, but if you go to the Bay County clerk site, you can actually register there so that if there's any action taken against your title, you receive an alert. And it is a somewhat after the fact method, because that deed or anything that happens against your title is already going to be recorded by the time you get the alert. But a quick detection, if it does get through, really helps the fallout of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think realtors, you don't need to take a blind eye, like turn a blind eye to this. Like everybody wants to make money. Like everybody, you know, and maybe it might not be about money, but I do kind of see where it opens it up for realtors to maybe turn a blind eye. They're like, they don't want to believe it. Like, oh, I feel unsure about it, but no, I'm sure he's legitimate. It's like, do your due diligence, because it's, you know, can you imagine if a land is bought, and say that buyer starts building on it, because this is what was going to happen. It was a contractor that wanted to build a house on that lot and then sell it. Can you imagine if the real seller comes down to Mexico Beach to check out their lot and there's a house on it?
Well, I think one of the things that, you know, tipped you off, because
They would own that house that's on their land, right, Sarah?
I mean, there's a
They make me
litigation
happy.
process, you know. Unfortunately, I've
Can you
never
imagine?
dealt with
That'd be
one, but it
awful.
is,
I'm
you
sure
know,
it's happened.
early detection. That's why I'm
Yeah.
talking before something's built, you know, it
Yeah.
really helps the process after the fact. I think one of the things, you know, asking questions,
Yeah.
you know, Casey, the survey you had, I think one of the things that tipped you off was it was a survey company that's not typically seen in our area.
Yeah, it was like in, what was it, Central Florida or something?
Yeah,
I
South
can't
Florida.
remember.
And I think one
In
of the
South Florida.
things that stood out to me, besides the fact that they had presented a survey,
It was a fraudulent survey.
that maybe they didn't want a surveyor out on the land and neighbors seeing it. If the neighbors happen to know the owner, like,
Wow.
hey, there's somebody surveying your land. Are you going to be building? Oh, how
Right.
exciting. And they're like, what do you mean there's somebody, you know, surveying my land? One of the calls that I got from a realtor was they were putting on a listing, and when they checked between the time that they started talking to the seller and the time that they went to go live, they went back and did another check and saw that I had closed the property. And she said, are you sure you had the real sellers? And I'm like, yes, I've done other work for them. They came in my office, like everything checks out. But she was from a county north of here and asked to list a property in Bidawee. And it's like, well, how did they find you? How did they get to you?
Right.
But I mean, I think there's more risk maybe with, you know, FSBOs or with the flat fee listing service.
listing services,
And there's
'cause
a
they don't-
reason that they're going to a flat fee listing service
they're not gonna
and
vet
not
'em.
engaging a realtor
Yeah.
because they don't want to be, you know.
They didn't verify the
Caught.
identity.
Yeah, that's right.